Vanchakalpatarubhayasya kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radharani Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we have a very interesting topic, and I can see that I have to compete a lot with the kids today. So it is said that the sounds of the children in the house are like the Vedic hymns. They indicate happiness and prosperity. So we have an interesting topic. I wanted to thank Akshay and Priyanka for bringing a very practical and a relevant topic, which is how do we prioritize our material and spiritual lives? And given the fact that Tuesday is Gita Jayanti, so wanted to draw on the Bhagavad Gita to get some understanding of this. So, and Bhagavad Gita is a very appropriate book to help us guide. So the Bhagavad Gita is a very appropriate book to guide us in this important and practical point. And so at that the way I like it to be more discussion oriented, because topics like these, there's a philosophical aspect, of course, but a big part of it is how do we bring it in our own lives? How do we practically apply the philosophy that is given? So, in a way, Bhagavad Gita is all about prioritization. So, if you recollect that when the Bhagavad Gita starts, Arjun, he is not sure what to do. He has two options, right? Either fight the war or renounce the war. And he's trying to figure out what to do. The whole chapter 1 is basically Arjun being tossed on the horns of dilemma. Why should I fight? Why should I not fight? Gives various reasons to Krishna, and Krishna is hearing. Krishna is listening him out. And then when the second chapter opens, the second verse of the second chapter, Krishna starts giving him some general advice there. But Arjuna is not satisfied with that. He's asking for more specific advice that is actionable. So giving advice is predicated on the nature of one's relationship. If somebody is close to you, then you give more specific advice. And otherwise, you give general advice, philosophical advice. That's what Krishna does earlier on. He's giving in a friendly way. He's saying that how will this miserly weakness of the heart come to you? What's wrong with you, Arjun? But Arjun is not satisfied with it. He needs specific advice. So he in the 7th verse, then he speaks very directly to Krishna. Right? He said, "Karpanya doshipata svabhava prachami mam taram dharma samudacheta." He says that Karpanya, Kripan, that my heart is become miserly. Karpanya doshpata svabhava. And I don't know what to do. Krichami tamutamuche cheta yashreya sham nishitan buhitan me shishastyam tvam shadi prapanna. And he says that now you have to tell me, because shishastyam tvam, that I am a disciple, shishyas prapanna, that is surrendered to you. And what is the problem that Arjuna places in front of Krishna? He says that I don't know what to do. So essentially he is asking Krishna to help him in prioritizing things. That I have different options and I don't know what to do. Please help me. And that actually is the real beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. That after that, when Krishna starts giving him very specific and actionable advice. And we see that's the general. So Bhagavad Gita is a conversation, questions and answers. After that verse, at least 3 times again, Arjun will ask Krishna questions in the similar way. That how do I prioritize? How do I prioritize things? Akshay, you have a Bhagavad Gita? Okay, can you get one? So as the conversation proceeds, Arjun is a warrior. He's a Kshatriya, and he's a king. Just keep it with you. I'll ask you to read some verses from him. So he's a king, and the nature of Kshatriyas are that they're very, very practical. They're action oriented. That this is the hill, I need to conquer it. Let me go ahead and conquer it. So we see this interplay between Krishna's more philosophical mood and Arjun's more actionable mood. And Krishna tends to soar in the stratosphere, giving high level philosophical guidance. And Arjun keeps pulling him down, saying, fine, what do I do? So if you can read 3.1. So after the first clarification, Arjun asked from Krishna. In 3.1, he will again ask for another set of clarification. Okay, just read the English.
Arjun said, O Janardhan, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work.
Right. And if you can get ready with 7.2. So this is Arjun. So in the intermediate chapters, Krishna had spoken about karma and jnana, and more so about karma. So Arjun again says, what do you want me to do? He said, why do you engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think intelligence is better than action? So Arjun's understanding of intelligence says that I'll study the scriptures. And Krishna, towards the end of the second chapter, he glorifies the state of studying, of being situated properly in one's spiritual conception. So then Arjuna asked the same question, that what would you like me to prioritize? Would you like me to act, or would you like me to engage in the study of the scriptures? So Krishna again goes and explains him in chapter 5, maybe the first or the second verse. Can we read that?
O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce war. Arjun said, O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce war, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?
If you can read the next verse also, if I could.
The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work.
Okay, thank you. So this is Arjun. He's again asking Krishna that you told me to work and you told me to act, right? And then I'm still confused. He says that I'm confused by your equivocal instructions. So when one is performing activities at an actionable level, with philosophy it is okay to the nature of philosophy is that there is always some kind of ambiguity built into it, because that's the nature of intellectual discussions. You deal with generalities, you deal with trends, you deal with concepts, but when it comes to actionable, then you have to be specific, because that's where you will put your time and you will put your effort. So in the same way, and I'm not going to read out the verses, but in the same way, in the 18th chapter, once again, Arjun will, and this is the last chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, once again Arjun will ask this question to Krishna, that can you help me prioritize? So, two things we can understand from this. One, the fact that this is a question that is asked on the battlefield by a person who has everything at stake means that it is an important question. And second, the fact that Krishna answers this question means that this is something that is important for us in our own lives. So in order for us to do anything, including spirituality, in order to do anything, prioritization is very, very important. So before I start discussing a little bit more on the topic, all of you in your lives, you encounter this on a day-to-day basis, because there's always competing priorities, right? Between work and home. At work, there's different works that you have to prioritize. At home, different activities. As aspiring devotees, material and spiritual, which is to a great extent the focus of this topic. So I just want to hear from you, how do you prioritize? We do it, so all of us do it. We go through some thought process and we say, I have these 20 things to do and I need to prioritize. So how do you go about the process of prioritizing?
First thing is which is the urgent one, to be done.
Which is the urgent one?
Urgent.
Okay, thank you. Priyanka?
I think honestly, Prabhuji, in my personal situation, I'm speaking from my personal, this is my personal opinion. If you prioritize your association, everything falls in place. So if you prioritize devotee association over other material associations, spiritual life starts getting prioritized as opposed to spiritual life. Because, every weekend there are going to be birthdays. Especially when you have kids, there are going to be birthdays every weekend. So you can't keep the same number for everyone's birthday. Because this I'm totally speaking this from my experience. The more I interact with people who are not non-devotees, my consciousness starts changing, and I feel that difference too. Because already there is so much going on in my mind. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right path? Why am I doing this, and why is the whole world not trying to follow me?
Right,
If this is what the real happiness and real true essence of life is, why is not everyone following my path? So, but if you are always constantly surrounded by devotees, then you just start seeing the rightness in everything.
So based on importance, you prioritize it based that it's important to associate with devotees. Okay, thank you very much. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Prabhuji, very I equal the same like importance and emergency. If I'm feeling emergent, then important also I can skip or can keep in lower priority.
Gotcha. Importance and urgency. Okay. Anything else? Everybody prioritizes, right?
Sometimes, like, the ideal way is like, importance or urgency, these parameters stuff, but sometimes you feel like doing it. So there is always the battle between what you feel like doing and what is important for you. Sometimes we prioritize better and sometimes.
So you're saying prioritization is a bit of a, even though you do it, it may not always be optimal. Okay, thank you. That's a good realization. Any other thoughts?
I'm just thinking of agreeing with what Priyanka was just sharing, and also just thinking that the stage of life that I am right now, materially and spiritually, initially it used to be like I have to do this before, because I made vows, committed to, promised my spiritual master, or committed to the process, or it works, etc., etc. But now I'm beginning to see that I actually want to give this more importance, because like Prabhupada is always saying, there's danger at every step, there is uncertainty about so many things in our life, and it's not that life is perfect for anyone, and it's not perfect at our end also. There's always so much going on, so many different, sometimes it's related to my mother, sometimes it's group, sometimes this or that. So then I think that it's better I just try and bring my consciousness and my mind to Krishna's feet, because he's the supreme controller. If I just surrender to him and just let him take over, then it's better for me. And I guess that helps me prioritize. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
One more was there, what is the goal of your life? You prioritize based on your goals also. Like, where do you want to go?
Right.
So,
Yeah. So I heard that there are I guess two coalescing factors that came that people were saying they were using to prioritize. One is importance and the other is urgency. That how important is this thing to me, and how urgent it is. So I also wanted to. I'm kind of veering away from Bhagavad Gita at this point into more mundane topics. So prioritization is also one of the. They say is one of the keys that you will find, the ability to prioritize in successful people who are successful in corporate or business, etc. One of the common characteristics that they have is the ability to prioritize, and as you were saying, not only just prioritize, but prioritize correctly in an effective way. It's also interesting that the two factors that are considered to be critical in prioritization are the two factors that came up in our discussion. One is importance and the second is urgency. So Stephen Covey, he made $1.6 billion talking about these two factors in his 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. So it's based on the ability to prioritize. And then he made this point that causally prioritization is driven by two predominating factors. One is so you start your day, you have a list of things to do. So you have a list of things to do with against everything. you have how important is this to me and how urgent it is for me. And based on that, there are 4 possible outcomes. There are some things that are very important and very urgent. What do? You have no choice. You have to do them right away. The second option is there are some things that are important but not urgent. So what do you do for them? That you plan and make sure that you do them because they are important. There are some things that are urgent but not important. So these are symptoms of poor planning. That something that is not important became urgent because you did not get to it at time. And the fourth is, which is where a lot of us spend a lot of time, are things that are not important and not urgent. Right? So, browsing the web, watching television, and so there's there's no urgency related to it. There's not much importance related to it. So he calls them as time suckers because they take away all your time. So interestingly, the same notion, or maybe Stephen Covey stole it from Bhagavad Gita. The same notion is also presented by Krishna in a more thematic way in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is asking him these questions, that how do I prioritize based on the possible options that I have. Krishna tells him about 2 themes he develops. First, he tells Arjuna what is important for you, and then he talks to Arjuna about the urgency of doing it. So one area where the Bhagavad Gita differs from what Stephen Covey's understanding is, his take of urgency is that it's a bad thing. That nothing should be on your urgent plate. Everything should be planned and taken care of. Krishna says that you're already in a bad situation. Your house is already on fire. So you have to develop that sense of urgency. So first thing he talks about is that Arjun, try and determine what is important for you. So I was thank you, Prabhu. So just in terms of importance, I don't think this is a true story, but it's an interesting story about a person who bought a new car, a BMW, and is Vijay can talk about the Mercedes?
She's in India.
She's in
His nephew.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the person who bought a Mercedes and was very happy with the car. So he went to his workplace and then he wanted everybody to know that he had got a Mercedes. So he parked it right in front of his office. And he was so much absorbed in this is my Mercedes and whatever. So as he got off the car, another car came in and it basically hit his car and went by. And it peeled the door of the car. And this person was very, very upset. It's my brand new car, the door's gone, and things won't be the same. So in the meantime, the police came, the ambulance came, and the people from the ambulance, they started taking him to the hospital. I said, why are you taking me to the hospital? I need this car to be fixed right now. So the medical guy who came in, he said that I don't think you noticed, but you lost your hand also. the guy looks down and says, "Oh my God, my Rolex watch." So, so the general understanding is that what is important to one, your attention goes there. You automatically prioritize it. Which is why Krishna, from the very first instruction that he gives to Arjuna, what is the very first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna? Right in the second chapter, right after Arjuna surrenders to Krishna, and he says that Shishyastam Tvam Shai Prapadnam, that I am a surrendered soul unto you. What is the very first instruction Krishna gives Arjuna?
Klaibyam. He says he chastises him, Klaibyam, like that.
No, Clavium is before, that is 2.2. So he says, Natvayam Jatu Nasham Navtam Neme Janadipa Nacheve Na Bhavishyama Sarve Vayantaha Param. Never was there a time when you did not exist. I did not exist in all this. Kings do not exist. Never in the future will you cease to exist. The first instruction that he gives to Arjuna is, you are not the body, you are the eternal spirit soul. You existed in the past, you are existing now, and you will exist forever in the future. So that immediately changes the paradigm. That Arjuna was so far thinking about, how do I go about killing my own grandfather, Bhishma? How do I fight against my own brothers, my cousins, Duryodhan and the Kauravas? How do I shoot arrows at Dronacharya, who is my teacher? But Krishna says that you are a soul. Not only you are an eternal soul, everybody around you, Bhishma, Drona, Duryodhan, they are all eternal spirit souls. So he is aligning Arjuna to the sense of establishing the importance. Now the flip side is that the verse also indicates what happens when somebody is unable to prioritize properly. Right? So before Arjuna asks this question to Krishna, he's talking about his own state of mind. He says, Karpanya doshpata svava. He says, my mind is bewildered, my mouth is drying, my heart, I have so much of confusion. I don't know what to do. And the reason for that was he did not know what is the right thing to do. So he surrendered to Krishna. And Krishna, so if you notice in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna does not tell Arjuna what to do. The very last instruction in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna gives, what is the last instruction that Krishna gives to Bhagavad Gita? Now do what you want to do. He says, so I have told you. Now you do what you want to do. So the journey that Krishna takes Arjuna down is that I am not going to be didactic and say do this. It's kind of like they say that if you tell a person how to arrive to the solution, then he can independently arrive to it over and over again, as opposed to giving the solution to a person. So Krishna does not give the solution to Arjuna. He tells him how to arrive, how to prioritize correctly. And of course Arjuna, being Arjuna, he does prioritize. He says, now my confusion is gone. Now all the misgivings in my heart are vanquished. And I'm ready to follow your instructions. So in our lives, when we are looking to establish priorities between things that compete for a time, because we are limited both in the sense of the energy that we have and the time that we have, the first thing we need to establish the fact is that what is important for us. Because many times we look at it the other way around. So sometimes, and again, this is the nature of interaction. Sometimes people will ask and say that we want to make spiritual advancement, what to do? And then we'll tell them chant 1 round a day, or chant 4 rounds a day, which is also okay and effective. But you don't walk the person down the process. That why is it important to prioritize your spiritual life? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna over and over, what does Krishna call the material world as? Dukhalayam and Ashashrata. So he says that this is a place of misery and it is temporary. Now in a way the temporary is a good thing because it means that the misery is temporary. But also it's a bad thing because for those of us who are trying to seek happiness in this material life, it is temporary. Just like happiness is there, distress will be there. And just like distress is there, happiness is also there. But the message Krishna is giving to Arjuna that you're looking for the right thing in the wrong place. The nature of the soul is Satchitananda. That the nature of the soul is it is pleasure seeking. So there's nothing wrong in you looking for happiness. It is your constitutional right. It's your constitutional position to look for happiness. But you're looking for it in the wrong place. And then he guides Arjuna to say, but I can tell you what is the right place where you can get this happiness. In the second chapter, this is I think the 40th verse, he says, Neha Vikrama Nashasti Pratvayo na vidyate Dharmas apyasya Dharmas swa alpam apyasya Dharmam swa alpasya Neha Vikrama Nashasti Pratvayo na vidyate Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhava. So he says, Neha Vikrama Nashasti Pratvayo na vidyate. So he says, a little bit of progress on the spiritual path. Neha Vikrama Nashasti Pratvayo ya vidyate. Then, Swa Alpam apyasya dharmasya. Alpa means small. Swalpa means very small. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya. That a little progress in this path of dharma, trayate mahato bhaya. Trayate means it will give you relief. It will give you protection from mahato bhaya, from the greatest fear. What is the greatest fear in this human form of life? Death. And not retaining this human form of life. Because only in this form of life can you make spiritual advancements. So Krishna is planting these thoughts in Arjuna's mind in both ways. He is giving the positive and the negative also. So he also says that if you don't follow the spiritual path, you're doomed. Nothing can be done for you. So the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the divine and demoniac nature. And he gives first symptomatically, and then in the last he speaks 2 verses, in which in one verse he defines the demoniac. Then he says, before that he says, those who are demoniac, I condemn, I send them to the hellish regions, I condemn them to the lowest forms of life. And then Arjuna, he does not ask explicitly, the implicit question is, but who are these demoniac people? And then Krishna said that ya shastra vidim usrijya vartate kama kamaya na sasiddhim avapnoti na sukham na paramgate. That ya shastra vidhi utsrijya, that one who ignores the injunctions of the scriptures. Your shastra vidim utsrijya vartate kama karata. That so if a person ignores the scriptures, then how does he what motivates him to act. How does he establish his priorities? Vartate kamakarta, based on his calm, based on his sensual desires, based on what the senses are demanding at that time. That I want to, the tongue is saying that I want to eat this. Or the mind is saying is you should sleep now. No need to get up. Or some other sense is saying that this is where your happiness is. So vartate kamakarite nasa siddhim avapnoti. Avapnoti means acquires. Nasa siddhim, that no perfection. Na sukham na param gatim. And so if you're looking for happiness, wrong place. Na sukham, no happiness. Na param gatim. That the path from this point onwards is a downward slope. No param gatim, no elevation over here. So when we are trying to establish priorities in our life, even before we do that, the first thing we have to do is to understand what is it that is important for us. If Prabhupada would say, if you want to become a materialist, become a expert materialist. But if you read the scriptures, you understand what is really important for you, then it is your duty. So Prabhupada would translate dharma as duty. It's your dharma. It's your duty to prioritize your spiritual life. And one establishes that as important, then one's focus becomes vyavasatmika. Vyavasatmika means that Krishna says vyavasatmika buddhi ekahe kurunandana bahushaka nantasya buddhiya vyasatmanam. The vyavasatmika buddhi ekahe kurunandana. So the focus becomes single focus. So in the scriptures there is an anecdotal story about this, that there's once a sadhu who was sitting in the forest, and he was preparing his stuff to do puja, and a young girl comes and she runs over him. She knocks his aarti tray away and his flowers away, and she doesn't even notice her. She just runs over him and goes away. And sadhu is like, what is happening to girls of this age? That she kicked over all my paraphernalia, she didn't even stop to apologize, she went away. So anyway, he's a sadhu, so he cleans up everything, he sets it up again, and after some time he sees the girl coming back again. So this time the girl comes back and she gives obeisances to the sadhu, and she speaks respectfully to him, any service I can do. So the sadhu is puzzled, and he said that sometime back you came over here and you just knocked over me and you didn't even stop to say anything, and now you're like a different person. So the girl is mortified, she's apologetic, and she says that actually when I was leaving, I was going to meet the man that I love. And all my heart and my mind was completely focused on him. So I was not aware of my externals. I was not aware of anything else. When I'm returning now, my heart is pacified because I have been able to talk to him and spend time with him. So I'm more conscious of what is happening around me. And again she apologizes, gives obeisances, and goes away. So the sadhu begins to think. And he says, between me and the girl is more advanced. Because having ascertained what is important for her, she is with a single mind completely focused on her goal. She says, me, I've been trying to practice spirituality for such a long time, but I've never been able to develop that ekagraha manasa, that single-minded devotion. So the single-minded devotion is a secondary symptom. The primary cause of it is that we are convinced about the importance of spiritual life. So question to you is that how do we walk down that path? How do we understand about the importance of spiritual life?
So the other people who are following and you see them well in the material as well as like spiritual life, or maybe you see them blissful, happy.
So I think you made 2 points. One is by observing people who have made that their priority and then taking inspiration from it. And I think the first you said was by associating with them and understanding their thought process. Okay, thank you. Rajneesh Prabhu?
Yes, on the same thoughts, Prabhu, we can also look at the counterpart who have not prioritized and are not happy actually. So I was reading one book today, Steve Jobs, of course, and then he was like, he had that sense of urgency in his life, and he was like, live your life as if it's the last day, and then one day it'll come true. And that's how he was practicing his life. And then eventually he was on his deathbed and hardly able to focus on what he thought is the most urgent thing in his life. His heart was still there a little bit, but then even before he died, he kind of gave up, and he was like in that thought process. And when he was preaching to other kids also in the college and all, he's saying, follow your heart. And he was not happy, even though he was most successful. So that's another parameter that he did not prioritize. Probably correct in one sense.
Correct. So good. So I think 2 points. One is by seeing how people who have prioritized spiritual life leading their lives, and by seeing people who have not prioritized the spiritual life leading their lives. I think this was a few months ago, and in a matter of a few months or so, there were a lot of high-profile suicides. There was this famous chef, who was his name? Anthony Bourdain, and there was this very rich heiress to some fashion kingdom. Some 2-3 people who would, you would generally, probably envy them because they were rich and famous or beautiful. There was that actor also, Robin Williams, famous person, and they all died because taking your own life is an extreme step. They have nothing else left in your life to take your life, but they had everything else. They had money and wealth and fame and all that. So obviously did not give them what they were looking at. So thank you for that, Shivani.
To have faith in the process and the goal.
To have faith in the process and the goal. Right. And I think that's an important aspect because to a great extent spirituality runs on the takeoff is on the platform of faith. Because you do something that is not experientially verifiable right away. So you do something based on faith. It's like when you go to school, at least when you're in the earlier grades of the school, the teacher tells you a lot of stuff, you have no idea whether it's true or not. But you still, if you don't, you can never reach the further grades. The teacher tells you this is ABC, you say, okay, this is ABC, right? If the teacher is perverted, they may teach you something else, and then you can't use it. But the idea is that on the platform of faith, we engage in the process of spirituality. You can validate it, like Gopal is saying, you can validate it by seeing how do people who have this conception, how do they live their lives? Or you can validate it by what Rajneesh Prabhu is saying is that how do people who do not have that conception live their lives? And then on the platform of faith you start it, and then it becomes experiential to yourself. So thank you, that's a good point. What else? Everything?
Focusing on the temporariness of the outcome that we get by material endeavors.
That's a very good point. because so Prabhu made the point that focusing on the temporariness of the endeavors that we make, and this is something that we don't even have to look outside our lives. We can get that from within our lives. That so many things we have aspired for and wanted really desperately, and now they are inconsequential, right? And you think back in your own life, and then you were like, really, I did all this for that, right? And even then we still do it. So, but giving that introspection, that philosophical understanding, that so many things that we aspire for have either they say that the worst thing that can happen to one's dream is that you achieve it, because then you say that, okay, this is what it is all about, right? Like, Steve Jobs, he probably dreamt, I don't know if he dreamt, but he changed the world. His phones and his all that stuff, he did all that. And if you read I haven't read the biography of Steve Jobs, but he comes across as a very mean-minded, spirited person with a lot of temper tantrums. It's not a very happy person, basically. So understanding experientially, Prabhupada would say that a first-class person will hear and understand. A second-class person will see and understand. A third-class person will do it and understand. A 10th-class person will see it, hear it, do it, but still not understand. So one way or the other, we're kind of, and this is more for us. This is not for looking at other persons saying this is first class, this is 10th class. This is more for us. That how do we elevate ourselves from being a 10th class person to a first class person. So the other aspect of prioritization is the sense of urgency. So when it comes to urgency, this is where even those of us who have been able to establish the sense of importance, many times we slip. There is always tomorrow. And especially the Hindu conception is there is always the next life. Right? If not this life, next life. Krishna said, Natvayam Jatunash.
But that's happened with me also, because I'm eternal, so what's the rush? Right?
Yes. And so that sense of, so if we consider something as important, but the urgency is not there, then it moves to the quadrant of planning. So we are always planning to be better devotees. We are always planning to chant better rounds. We are always planning to increase our rounds. Someday I will do it. Right? What's the typical response to a person? You say that, take to spiritual life. I say, Hey Baba, I'm working right now. When I retire, I will take to spiritual life. Old age, I will take to spiritual life at the time. Right? Person is old, you tell them take to spiritual life. And the person will say that, see, just one life in millions. I have a lot of time. But Krishna, he disagrees. Even though he of course makes this point that you're eternal, he tells Arjuna that having come down to this temporary miserable place, immediately make plans to exit it. So why do you think Krishna wants to instill this sense of urgency? We see that similar in other religions. In Christianity, if you do not perfect this life, what is the consequence? Eternal damnation. Right? You have only this one life. So they have that sense of, at least the ones who are sincerely practicing Christians, they have that sense of urgency. That if I do not accept Lord Jesus as my Savior, then I go to eternal damnation there. But not so much in, philosophically not so much in, but Krishna still makes this point to Arjuna, that you take to this now, and you take to this with a sense of urgency. So why is he instilling this sense of urgency in Arjuna? Even though more than Arjuna, Krishna knows that several lifetimes, eternally the lifetimes are there.
Every second we are committing that many more sins if we don't take to this path, and we are multiplying and multiplying.
That's a good point. So one reason is that every step that we are taking that is not forward is a backward step, right? So sometimes before we got these GPSs, we used to all like drive by maps and all that, and I have a horrible sense of direction. So many times I would go completely in the wrong way, and then at some point I would realize that I'm going in the wrong way. And then every mile that you drive, you realize that it's the mile that you have to cover back again. I remember once we were going to Canada, and I made one wrong turn on a highway, and then 17 miles later on there was an exit that I had to turn back. It was the longest 17 mile. Of course, Indulekha was reminding me I made a wrong turn. So that was the longest 17 mile that I drove, because I was aware that now I have to turn back and make that 17 miles. So that's one reason for the sense of urgency. That either you're going in the right direction, or because the nature of life is you can't stand still.
Yeah.
There's nothing like treading water over here. Now, if you're not doing this, you're doing that. It's either one or the other. Krishna says either you're under the control of my external energy, or you're under the control of my internal energy. No third place there. Either you're material or you're spiritual. No third place. You can't be materially spiritual or spiritually material, right? So there's no amalgamation of the conception there. What else? Very cool.
Death can come anytime, and we don't know what is our next chance will be.
Very good. So the second reason why Krishna wants to instill this sense of urgency is that we have no understanding of how long do we have this life for. Death can come anytime. So if you're planning to do so, like in Mahabharata, there is this pastime. I think I shared this before about a Brahman coming to Yudhishthira Maharaj asking for alms, and Yudhishthira Maharaj says, "I'm really busy. I have a lot of work in my court. Come tomorrow." And then Bhim heard it, and he went to the top and he started ringing the bell, and everybody came. It was an emergency bell. Everybody came running, and Yudhishthira came running. What happened? What happened? And he said, "I have a very important announcement to make, that my brother is immortal." So Yudhishthira said, "What are you talking about? I am not immortal. Who told you I am immortal?" And Bhima said, "I just heard you tell that Brahman to come tomorrow. That means you know for sure that you're going to live tomorrow. And if you know that you're going to live for all the tomorrows, that means you know that you're not going to die." So then Yudhishthira understood the mistake that he made, and he called the Brahman back and apologized and listened to whatever he had to listen. So any moment we can die, and the problem is not so much with the death itself. The problem is what happens to us subsequent. Do we get this human form of life or not? If you haven't lived according to the scriptures, very unlikely we'll get the human form of life. There are how many kinds of species? How many kind of forms of life there are? There are 8.4 million kinds. Birds and water, fishes, etc. And depending on what we desire and deserve, we get a particular form of life. Only in the human form of life can we make spiritual advancement. So you don't know how many millions of years we'll have to spend in a different form of life before we get this opportunity to make spiritual advancements again. Even if we get a human form of life, we do not know if the conditions may be conducive. People who get a human form of life because of bad karma, they're born in very restrictive environments. So either they're very poor, or they are sick, or something is there which is very restrictive. Difficult to practice spirituality in that case. So many countries in the world, you don't have the option to practice. I mean, we're lucky we are in the US or in India where we can practice spirituality. One of my friends, he went to Singapore and he wasn't allowed to enter the country because at immigration they asked him, what is your spiritual inclination? And he said, I'm a Hare Krishna devotee. He said, we don't need Hare Krishna devotees here. So he was actually sent back from there. And there are some countries that are even more restrictive, where you actually get punished to practice. Right? And the other is, we don't know what kind of family we will be born to. One of the biggest impediment to spirituality also is opulence. The people who are born in rich houses, they are so much engaged in enjoying the senses that there is no need for them to inquire about any other thing. So we don't know what will happen. So that sense of urgency is also important. When Srila Prabhupada was once talking to a Prabhupada disciple about what is the difference between the times, and this was about 40 years ago when Prabhupada was here and he was associating with Prabhupada, and now. And he said that the difference that I see is people nowadays, they understand more. And people, he was talking about devotees. He said devotees nowadays, they understand more about the scriptures. They understand more about the importance of taking to spirituality. But they do not have the sense of urgency. He said when Prabhupada was there, everybody had this sense of urgency. I need to finish my business in this very lifetime and go back to Godhead. And he was kind of laughing. He was saying, there are people who are saying, Prabhu, I'm chanting 1 round now. And maybe next year I will chant 2 rounds. And he was saying in his own time, people would join, and within a week, if they didn't chant 16 rounds, everybody would be on their case. Prabhu, what's going on? Don't you want to go back to Krishna? Don't you want to go back to Godhead? And he would say, yes, I have to go back. And they would start chanting. So urgency, of course, is a razor's edge. That the urgency should be used to propel us in the right direction. So there is another pastime in the scriptures about two bodhivaratas, two intellectuals, and they were in the deep forest. They were enjoying the trees and the birds and the forest foliage. And then one of the person, he tells the other one, you see down there, there's a fire, there's a forest fire that's coming. The first one who looks at it and he says, yeah, there's this huge fire in the forest that's coming. And I wondered how it started. We just came down that path and there was no fire, and now there is a fire. So the second one says that yes, but the fire is coming towards us. Better for us to escape. And the first one is like, yes, but I'm still very curious. How did this fire come by? So while the first one is philosophizing like that, the second one runs away. So the first one is burnt and the second one escapes. So it's a metaphor. The analogy is that this material world is considered to be a burning house. So we are in the middle of this burning house. We have two options. So either we can sit and philosophize or speculate. What's the cause of the fire? Why did the jiva come to the material world? What about What about those who do not believe in Krishna? What happens to those who believe in Christ? What happens to the Muslims? What happens to the people who were born before Krishna appeared? So many philosophical questions, well, not even philosophical, speculative questions that one can indulge in. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada's spiritual master, he makes this point. If your house is burning, the most important thing is to get out of the house. Once you're out of the house, fine. Then you can try and figure out, why did the house burn? How can I make sure that my next house does not burn? But the intelligent person will evaluate the urgency of the situation and act accordingly. So Bhagavad Gita makes these two important points. It is important for us to engage in our spiritual life, and it is urgent also. So based on these two, we can now establish our priorities. So we get up in the morning and we have so many things to do. Some are material, some are spiritual. Right? So when we prioritize it, we look at it from the lens of Krishna's instructions. So this is something that is really important. And there is a sense of urgency to do it. But if you are having trouble in establishing a priority that is satisfying to us, it means that we need to go back and review these two aspects of our spiritual identity. That do we consider it to be important or not? If we do not consider it to be important, then we deprioritize it. Do we consider it to be urgent or not? If not, then we just plan for it. But if you are able to read or discuss or hear and understand that this is important and urgent, then it will automatically drive our process of prioritization. So this is how Bhagavad Gita talks about the process of prioritization. Now, of course, Bhagavad Gita is all about one's spiritual life, but the same aspect can be used to deprioritize also, because Krishna talks about the spiritual versus the material world. So in the 8th chapter he says that everything in this material world is perishable, but there is another world where everything is eternal. Everything in this world is saturated with misery, but there is another world where there is happiness all around. So Krishna gives both the pictures. So he is helping us prioritize and deprioritize at the same time. So I'll stop here and see if there's any questions, comments, or discussions. Right.
One question. You mentioned Krishna taught Arjuna about the importance and the urgency. So, but where is, like, I couldn't understood, like, where Krishna told that yes, spiritual life is important, or you do, this is the right thing, or where he emphasized on the urgency factor mainly.
So, like I said, that so Krishna develops it thematically. So he talks about, so right from the 2nd chapter onwards, Krishna starts talking about the importance of spiritual life, right? So if you read the verses, you will see that theme developing over and over again. That, so where he says it? He says it in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Right. So when you read it, you will see both the themes coming again and again. And it's a good exercise that if you go through the verses, then you can actually tag the verses. That these are the verses where Krishna is speaking about the importance of spiritual life. And these are the verses where Krishna tells Arjuna, and I believe this is in the 8th chapter, where he says that having come down to this miserable place, don't waste any time over here. Go back immediately. Right? And same thing, you make similar points again and again.
keeping these 2 points in mind.
Right, right. So there's another way to study the Bhagavad Gita. Right, because there are many themes that are developed in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna talks about the spirit soul, he talks about himself, he talks about nature, talks about karma. Right? So that's one way of studying the Gita. Krishna talks about karma yoga, he talks about jnana yoga, dhyan yoga, bhakti yoga. Another way of studying the Gita. Krishna is talking about the importance of spiritual life and the urgency of following it. Another way of studying the Gita. Yeah?
Thank you.
Anything else?
So I want to comment on the point like how we can understand, no, like progressing in the spiritual life. I want to quote one small lecture from Puran Prabhuji. Within 2 days I have one. So he was telling like during his study in IIT Mumbai, one of his friend he used to get as topper. He used to come as topper every time, and one day he just hanged himself in a pan, and he did a suicide. The reason was every time he used to come topper, and that time he got second position. And another situations that semester only, 3 of his friends they are going like making very happy, and Prabhuji asked like you are very happy, what happened? Like already you have 4 papers back paper in that semester, but you are not worried about this. They told it's okay, like entering to the IIT is our responsibility, we did well, that's why you came. And exiting depends upon the college. So he came to the conclusion, the problem was same. The suppose results, the way to look or the reactions of other, the way we are looking or reacting to that situation varies from person to person. That depends upon the consciousness. And we can see in spiritual life so many people with time they are practicing, the way to look the life, the way to react to the situations, that changes in one life. In one life, even in a couple of years. Getting satisfactions, anxiety level less. So from those points, even like here so many devotees are there, we are looking they experiencing their day-to-day life every time, even we are seeing you. So every time we can realize, understand, yeah, there is a difference between the persons before spiritualism and after adapting. So that is my sense for
Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts?
One more I was just thinking about is your sense of urgency in terms of we are accumulating karmas every day, and as more karma you get more and more entangled into the life. So if you don't go to the spiritual, then we start become bad and good karma both.
So it's the problem that Rekha made that you're basically adding more stones on your back, more difficult to go up the hill after that. Thank you.
Prabhuji, you mentioned somewhere in your talk regarding materially spiritual people and spiritually material. So, and you're saying there's nothing like that. Either you are spiritual or you are material. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because most of us are in kind of both the boats.
Not really. So thank you for bringing that up. So there's a difference between our conception and its execution. And for people who have understood the importance of spirituality, they are in the spiritual realm at the time. They may not have extricated themselves completely from the material conception. But that does not mean that they are not in the spiritual realm. So devotees who are chanting, devotees who have understood the importance of making spiritual advancements, they're already in the spiritual realm at the time. They may have material desires. They may live seemingly material lives, but it is just the Prabhupada will give the example that we have a fan running, and then you pull the plug out, the fan will still run for some time, even though there is no power there. And that's we for so many lifetimes we have lived. Our fans have moved in a particular direction with a lot of force, a lot of intensity there. Take a while. Unless somebody, like Prabhupada came and he put his hand on the fans of so many people and stopped it, right? If we are fortunate, that might happen. If not, then based on our own desires, based on our own conceptions, it will stop. That's why Krishna gives his assurance in the 9th chapter. And he says, why would he say Apiche Sudarachara Bhajate Mam Ananyava Sadhureva Samantavya? That he says, even if you're doing sinful activities, if you're situated in the proper conception, you're my devotee. Right? Because ultimately, the destination, Krishna is looking at the destination. Ultimately, the destination is assured. Some people it may be this lifetime, some people it may be a million lifetimes. So Krishna really doesn't. We do, but for Krishna it's all. With his one breath, the whole universe is created. So for him, time is a little different. It runs a little differently. And the flip side is that for those who are looking for material benefits out of spirituality, they're in the material conception, right? Whatsoever Yamimam Pushpitam Vacham, Yamimam Pushpitam Vacham, Avapaschati, Yamimam. So, but one people who are very much attracted Pushpitam Vacham by the flowery words of the Vedas. Yamimam Pushpitam Vacham. Pravadante avapaschita Vedavadrata Partha Nanyata Sthiti Vadena. That they are Vedavadrata. So they are supposed followers of the Vedas. Nanyata Sthiti Vadena. They say nothing else. They are not spiritualists. But they are using spiritual to make material advancements. They may become spiritualists. They may develop faith in the Vedas at some point of time. Right? So as individual spirit souls, we are Krishna's marginal energy. We are Krishna Tathastha Shakti. We can either be under the control of his Antarangini Shakti or Bhayahari Shakti. We can be either under the control of Durga Devi or Radharani. Right? We can't have a dual control program. Right? Like 8 to 5 Durga Devi, 5 to 9 Radharani, can't do it like that, right? Now it's possible that we may be under the control of Radharani, but we may not be doing things towards satisfaction. That does not mean that we are not under her control. We are under her control, we are taking shelter of her. Right? So we have children. Children are sometimes naughty. More often than that, they are naughty, but that doesn't mean that they are not our children. They always are our children. So, when we take to the spiritual conception, we come under the control of Srimati Radharani. If we did not, there would be no hope for us. So, what would be the hope for us? That on our own, we will perfect our lives? It's not going to happen. Right? Durga Devi is much stronger than us. Anytime she wants us, she can push us around. Right? So, the only hope for us is that yes, we are situated in the spiritual conception. We are making this path. All that Krishna and Radharani wants to see from us is sincerity. Right? Rest of the heavy lifting, Krishna does himself. Right? And he says that this is the 9th chapter. He says that I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. Right? So little bit that we have, he preserves. A lot that we lack, he carries. In the 10th chapter, he is more specific. He says, Tesha nevanukam partha aham agyan jantiva nashame bhagastu gyan dipena partha. That he says that one who comes to me, that from within gyan dipena, I give them this knowledge, I give them this realization. what is important and what is not. Same point. That what is to be prioritized and what is to be deprioritized. That helps?
Sure, Prabhu. Helps. So what you're saying is, of course, there are certain things that we are dedicated doing to our spiritual life, but the other activities you're involved in, if we are still saying yes to Krishna during that time and keeping that as a prominent mood and still doing whatever else we are doing because we have to do those
Yes.
things,
Thank you.
that would help.
Any important points or suggestions that should be remembered to maintain the sense of urgency? Because many times I feel
So, thank you. So that's a segue to the concluding part of my discussion. That how do we bring this to our lives? How do we actually practice it? Let's assume we develop this sense of understanding of this, or how do we continue to develop the sense of importance and urgency? So one thing is that the process builds upon itself. It is so there is a certain kind of process, I forget the name, that build upon itself, right? Self-sustaining processes, right? So this is a self-sustaining process. That the only way to make advancement in this is to practice it. Even if you practice it imperfectly, the imperfection will ultimately give to perfection. Going back to the point you're making. And when you're practicing it imperfectly, we may be Mishra Bhaktas, more materialist and less spiritualist. But our conception is there. We have a desire to surrender to Krishna. We have a desire to make spiritual advancement. So that is the perfection. So important thing is to get off the mental platform and start practicing. The nature of the mind is that it will always, every time, 100% of the time, what will it do? It will mislead you. That is the nature of the mind. You may have wealth, you may have health, now your mind will tell you that your situation is the most deplorable. You may work hard to get something, you get it, and the mind, instead of allowing you to be happy, will actually say that this is actually nothing. This is the other thing that you need to get. And unless you get that thing, you are a failure. And then even before you have sat down to enjoy that, you're off to the races again. But the process is one that will help you tame the mind. The process is one that acts at a causal level, not at a symptomatic level. Prabhupada would also give practical guidance on this, and I have based on. So this is based on a little bit of instructions of Prabhupada and also instructions of Rampa Swami. I have 4 points over here. So the one is, and this is Prabhupada's example, the big rock example. That you have a beaker and you have big rocks, small rocks, sand and water to put it in. Right, and then you put the water in, and then you put the sand in, and then you put the small rocks. There's no place for the big rocks because the water is already filling it, the sand fills it, the small rocks take away the rest of the space. But if you put the big rocks first, then you put the small rocks, then you put the sand, then you put the water, everything will fit in the same beaker. So we have a limited amount of time. But if you prioritize things properly, everything will fit into it. We have to chant our rounds, we have to read, we have to do deity worship. So those becomes our big rocks. Like Priyanka is saying that Vaishnav Sangha, that becomes the big rock. So we put the big rocks in, it does not mean that now there is no space for the other things. There is still space for them. The small rocks will go, the sand will go, and the water will also go. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that time I am. And we see Krishna has this ability to bend time. In Vrindavan, when he was doing the Ras Leela, from the material perspective, it was one night. But in the Bhagavatam, it is said that it lasted for an entire day of Brahma. So, he can change time any way he pleases. He can do that for his devotees also. So, when his devotees start prioritizing spiritual life, then actually more time becomes available to them. I was talking to, some years ago, I was talking to one of my godbrothers, and he was relatively young, and he was in Brown University, so he left school and he became a full-time devotee, and for 11 years he was distributing books and preaching, and then he got married, and then I think he also separated, and then he decided to, by that time he was like 30, decided to pursue his material life, so he went back to Brown, and he had done 1 year of his undergrad, he resumed his undergrad, and he did the remaining 3 years in 2 years. After that he did his law, and so right now, not right now, but when I talked to him, he was practicing what is called as M&A law, which is mergers and acquisitions. And he was sharing that lawyers, so that is the highest form of, most expensive form of lawyers. So they charge $2,000, $3,000 an hour to advise on mergers and acquisitions. And he was saying that it's not that I'm like really smart or anything like that, but he said I would see the students around me and they would be struggling so much to do their courses, to do this. I would get up in the morning, chant my 16 rounds, do my studies, have some time to relax, and then sleep on time also. So just because I was able to set my routine. So before exams, my friends they would come, all-nighters, this and that, and he said I wouldn't even notice that tomorrow is an exam day, because whatever I did, I was disciplined and I scheduled it. And despite the fact, he said I led, supposedly a very difficult course, never missed his rounds, always chanted 16 rounds. He was Brahman initiated, always chanted his Gayatri. He had taken a vow to read a certain number of pages of Prabhupada books every day without fail. He said, I read it. So one thing is that if we prioritize our life around our spiritual activities, things will fall into place. So if we establish that this is vital for my spiritual sustenance. What is important for us? Not many things. Of all the things, the most important is chanting. That takes the first priority. Right? So we chant our rounds, preferably at a fixed time, preferably in the morning. After chanting, the next most important thing is reading. That by the process of reading, we will get a sense of how important what we are doing. It will be a process of repeatedly convincing ourselves that this is the path that we would like to read, to follow. And deity worship. If you have deities, then worship the deities, and then Vaishnava Sangha. Right? So Vaishnava Sangha is difficult to get. So we may get it once in a week, once in a month, depending on our situation. But at least Shravana, Kirtan. So reading is Shravan and chanting is Kirtan. Of the 9 processes of devotional service, these 2 are the most potent, Shravan and Kirtan. So we construct our life along this big rock, small rock analogy. The second aspect is because when we live our lives, we will be performing all kinds. It said there are 3 kinds of karmas that we perform. There is nitya karma, There is Naitik karma and there is Kamya karma. So Naitik karma is sustenance. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to breathe, right? So there are basic activities that are unavoidable. That is Nitya karma. Then there is Naitik karma, that is optional activity. And there is Kamya karma, that is activities that we perform to satisfy our senses. And when we become aspiring spiritualists, we look at each of these three activities and connect each one of them to Krishna. How do we connect Nitya karma to Krishna? That the body that we have is best used in the service of Krishna and his devotees. The tongue that we have is best used, since it's getting close to Prasadam time, is best used to honor Prasadam and chant Krishna's name. So many sustenance activities that we do, they become connected to Krishna. Now Kamya karma is a little difficult because Kamya karma could be of different varieties. But if we look at it from the lens of the first lens of importance, then so Kamya karma is discretionary activities. That for whatever reason you have 2 hours left, what to do? Right? And the senses will say, I have some ideas that I can give to you. Right? And we may listen to them, we may not. But again, if you are able to connect that to Krishna. You know, the ear says, let's listen to some music. Let's listen to some kirtan. Or another sense might say that let's watch something. So you can watch a Krishna conscious movie, so many lectures, so many plays. You know, the options are almost unlimited. So this takes practice, but it happens by deliberation. That if we are aware of it, that yes, these are my duties. As a husband, this is my duty to my wife. As a father to my child. As a mother to the family. How can I connect it to Krishna? I'm taking very good care of my child, but can I really take care of my child? Right? How can a person who is drowning save another person? Right? How can a person ever think that I am in this position to be somebody else's protector, when the person himself is unprotected? But you think that I am taking shelter of Krishna, and somehow or the other I am also going to give the same opportunity to my child. Externally, the activity may be exactly the same. The mother may still be running after the child, the mother may still be wanting to feed the child. The consciousness is different now. The consciousness is not that I am the protector, I am the sustainer, I am the doer. The consciousness is, as a servant to Krishna, I am taking care of this wonderful soul that Krishna has sent to me. And Prabhupada was very strict with his disciples. Take very good care of your children. Because some of the earlier disciples, they became so much focused on the spirituality that they started neglecting the children. And Prabhupada was very heavy on them, saying that Krishna has given you an important responsibility. He has sent a devotee, a potential devotee by your way. And your service to Krishna right now is to give that person. Now nobody can make another person a devotee. But what you can do is give the person an opportunity to become a devotee. How do you give the person an opportunity? One is by example, that you set an example, and the second is that you expose the person to situations where they can take to this. So that is the third way that we connect everything that we are doing to Krishna. And the fourth and the last way is always be in the shelter of devotees. So the shelter of the devotee is something that will protect us against ourselves. Because of our prior conditioning, we have this very, very strong trishna, we have this strong desire, this thirst to enjoy in the material world. Even though we have experienced over and over again that happiness in the material world is like a mirage. You run after it and then it's always just over the horizon. I get this, I'll be happy, but then there is something else there. If I get that, I'll be happy, and there is always something else. The biggest cause of unhappiness, what is the single biggest cause of unhappiness in the material world? It is envy. And there is nothing you can do about it. Because envy is not based on what you have. Envy is based on what the other person has. There is nothing you can do about it. There will be always somebody richer than you. There will be always somebody who is prettier than you or more handsome than you, or there is always somebody whose car will go faster than your car. Right? That's the nature. And there is nothing you can do about it. But if you are in the shelter of devotees, that gives you the most potent protection. Because when you start drifting, then just being in the association of devotees is potent enough. Rupa Goswami says that more potent than being in the association of devotees is being in the intimate association, which he says Radhi Pratikanati Guhyamakiti Prachati Bhamte Bhajate Chaiva, that have these 6 loving exchanges, that offer prasadam, take prasadam, offer presents, give presents, and most importantly, reveal your mind in confidence and accept their confidential exchanges. Right? So through the practice of this, I talked about 3. So one is the big rock example, is prioritizing spiritual life. The second is connecting everything to Krishna. The third is always being in the shelter of devotees. And the fourth is developing the mood of detachment. So the one thing that Krishna glorifies over and over in Bhagavad Gita again is this mood of detachment. So the strong mood of wanting to be attached to one's senses is always going to be an impediment. So detachment, of course, is not something that you can intellectually will. You cannot say that from tomorrow I am going to be detached, which is why it is said that one cultivates that mood. That one does not will oneself, but one cultivates that mood. So one can always be aware through introspection that is this something that I need or I want? And there is a difference between the two. The need is based on what you need to sustain yourself. The want is based on your desires. The need is satisfied by nitya karma. The want is kamya karma. So if you are able to make this distinction and then cultivate that mood, that maybe this is not the best. Maybe working 2 jobs just in order to get a better car is not the best use of my time. With 1 job, I can get enough money to take care of my needs and also to chant, also to perform some reading and deity worship. So I aspire to fill up my time with something that I don't really need. So from a practical perspective, as devotees who are aspiring spiritualists, these 4 things can help us if we are a little deliberate about doing it. So any change that we bring in our life does not happen by itself. There has to be something that is there is a deliberate mood there. If somebody wants to become an athlete, then just wanting to become an athlete will not make the person an athlete. But deliberately the person needs to do something. Maybe he has to exercise, maybe he has to eat right, maybe he has to practice the sport, and then he becomes an athlete. Now, wanting to become a spiritualist is the beginning of the journey, but one has to be deliberate about that also. So I'll stop over here, see if there's any concluding thoughts, questions or comments.
I just wanted to comment on the last point that you made about detachment. And I remember once I asked Rampad Maharaj about this detachment word, that I forget my exact question, but basically it was, we often talk about detachment, because Prabhupada, says that as devotees we should, try and practice detachment from this and that, and even in our family lives we have to be, not only from material things, but even in our relationships. And then Maharaj said that you don't have to force anything on yourself. Do not force detachment in your, mood or practices. It will automatically come as we get spiritually attached on the other side, which is, with Krishna, devotees, practices, chanting, etc. So because if we try to artificially detach like many yogis do, then there is a very high chance that we may actually fall from that standpoint. So it's better that we try and we practice whatever we've been asked to do, and then we naturally will develop the attachment to Krishna and the philosophy and the positive, and then the detachment will automatically start to come.
Right. And I think Guru Maharaj likes to give that example also of that you have a glass full of ink and you need to fill it with milk. So there are two ways to do it. One is you toss out the ink and you put milk in it, which is the two-step process, detachment and attachment. And he said the other process which we follow is that we start putting milk in the same glass. And first we have ink and milk, and then we have milk and ink, and then we have only milk there. So as we start developing attachment to Krishna, we automatically start developing detachment to the material conception. And actually that is considered to be an index or a symptom. Sometimes people would ask Prabhupada, am I making spiritual progress? Prabhupada would say that, ask yourself, are you developing detachment from the material world? If yes, then you're making spiritual progress. Okay, any other?
Prabhuji, you mentioned Naitik Karma optional. What are examples like?
So Naitik Karma is like you do Mundan Samskar or marriage, Vivah. So they're not optional, but they're intermittent. So they're not something that you do every day. They're not something that are essential to your sustenance. But still they're prescribed.
Okay.
Yes? Okay, so if there are no more questions, we'll have a few minutes before the children come up.